Today on Words and Numbers, pennies,
meta entertainment,
newspapers,
and blowing bubbles.
All this and more coming up next on Words and Numbers, brought to you by civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Ant, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
Well, years ago...
Let me rephrase, because I'm going to get hate mail. What's new and exciting in your world today? It's not this week. We do 2 episodes a week now.
Right, yeah. I was always an avid gamer, and about, I'd say 20 years ago, I had a game that I absolutely loved. I say game, it's, PC games. It was Hot Wheels. It's a Hot Wheels car. Like Hot Wheels cars. You drive it around the screen, it's got a track.
I had a collection of Hot Wheels cars when I was a boy.
And on the computer, you could do things with it that you can't do in real life, right? And so I'm messing with this game for a while, and my wife says, points out the fact that I'm playing a simulation of Hot Wheels cars, which are themselves simulations of real cars. So it's a two-step removed simulation, which leads me to this thing I discovered. We talked last time about my love of reels on Facebook, and usually, most of the time, I'm watching them as I fall asleep, and this was the problem with no glasses. I can't read the thing, so I have to, kind of confine myself to the ones with the big text. But there's one on there that kept showing up in my feed, but I didn't understand it. There's nothing, I don't know what's going on here, and so I would just skip the thing. And one time recently, I happened to have the volume up on my phone, and I realized, there's like dialogue here, and it's actually quite funny.
Hot Wheels content?
No, but I'll get back to Hot Wheels in a second. This is Clara, I wrote her name down and I lost it. Clara Batten. Clara Batten, like my Hot Wheels game, is a meta entertainer. So what goes on here is somebody posts something on Facebook or Instagram or what have you that's amusing, and then people come along and comment, as they do, and a lot of the comments are amusing. So you've got amusing comments on an amusing post, and then enter Clara Batten, who produces a reel with the post and the comments, and she's now commenting on the comments. So you've got amusing commentary on amusing comments on amusing post. She's hysterical. There was some picture somebody posted that probably was not meant as to be humorous. It's a young woman, a mother with her kid, and her kid looks to be perhaps a 3-year-old, but a particularly large 3-year-old, and she's there holding him. And then the Clara Batten is pointing out the comments. One guy says, "Oh yeah, I know the bloke. I used to work with him." It's just things like this, on and on and on. And she is hysterical. And so the interesting thing for me is I encountered her many times. I never realized it until I had the sound up. And then as I'm looking at this and being highly entertained, I'm realizing this is really weird. It's like my Hot Wheels thing, that it's entertainment based on entertainment based on entertainment.
All I know about...
a chance, check her out, Clara Batten.
All I know about Facebook Reels is they get me in a little bit of trouble around here. As the algorithm, I don't know how it works, but I get lots of pictures of women wearing tight leather outfits, and the wife points at this, and all I say is you click on one picture.
One! Yeah, and then it's all that.
Of a lady cracking a whip, and before you know it, that's what you get. Anyway, that's right. And now
here's an interesting study. Like how many pictures of Jesus do you have to click on to counteract that so that Facebook stops giving you this?
Well, I can tell you we're never going to find out, but let's move on. Today, as we speak, it's November 12th. Today is the day that the very last penny was minted.
About time.
We will not
About
have
time.
we will not have pennies moving forward. The last penny in circulation, I believe, was minted in July, but they had a ceremonial minting of a bunch of pennies that they're now going to auction off for millions of dollars for reasons. But the penny is gone.
Yeah, and let me put some perspective here, because I ran the math on this probably 20 years ago, and 20 years ago, the penny should have been gone 50 years before that. But another thing.
And
the last time,
it's probably worth noting that we had half cents in this country for a very long time.
that's where I was going. The last time we got rid of a coin was when we got rid of the half cent. And I forget when that happened. It would have been late 1800s,
It was in the
early
19th
1900s.
century. Yeah.
Yeah. But when we got rid of the half cent, of course, we got rid of it because its value was so low it didn't buy much of anything. Adjusted for inflation, it was the equivalent of about 15 cents today, which means we should be getting rid of the penny, the nickel, and the dime.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Although the nickel, we're getting rid of the penny because at present, as of right now, according to CNN, it costs 4 cents to make a penny.
Right. Yes.
And
Yep.
anybody could kind of see the problem there, that it's literally not worth it, and it can't be made to be worth it. Nickels are going to be next. There's already a problem. It costs a lot to make a nickel too, come to find out. Dimes are relatively safe at this moment, but there's going to be a real problem here. Now, the Canadians have already done this, and other countries have too. And you just don't have pennies, and people in shops round up, round down, whatever, to the nearest nickel one way or the other.
Right.
We can't do that here. Or maybe it's better to say we can't do that here everywhere. We have 4 states, and they are Delaware, Connecticut, Michigan, and Oregon, and numerous cities, including but not limited to New York, Philly, Miami, Washington, D.C. These places require by law merchants to provide exact change. Well, what are they going to do?
Well, they're going to have to round their prices.
They can't. That's illegal.
Why? I don't understand.
Well, I mean, functionally, you can't round prices to get to a nickel in every instance. You're going to run into this problem.
Well,
It's illegal not to give exact
when there's
change.
then a sales tax tacked onto it. So you got to do a bunch
Yes.
of math to figure out where you end up.
Yeah, and that's just not going to happen. You can see how
So these
complicated
stores-
that would be for a grocery store.
Right. So these stores are going to have to end up giving more change.
Probably, and there's there are further laws. Let me read you this one out loud because I want to make sure I get it exactly right. The law covering the federal food assistance program known as SNAP requires that recipients not be charged more than other customers. Since SNAP recipients use a debit card that's charged the precise amount, if merchants round down prices for cash purchases, they could be opening themselves to legal problems and fines. So, okay, You got to round up, but you can't round up because then you're charging for something you didn't deliver. And look, these are all technical problems, but they should have been laid out before the penny was discontinued. Right? Somebody should have said, okay, this is the list of problems you're going to have when you phase out the penny. Deal with it. And then some smart person could have said, all right, we could do this, and this, and it takes care of everything. But Trump, as is his custom, gave us a tweet, and then the Treasury did this, and here we are.
Oh,
And-
this is by fiat? He just
Yeah.
said, let there be no pennies?
Make it so.
Man, he should have done the same thing with the nickel at the same time.
Yeah, let's not get the people all worked up.
And
But, rounding up or down is really a problem. And there's one company, Quick Trip. You might have come across them in your travels. It's a family-owned convenience store, mostly in the Midwest. They decided to round down cash purchases in the stores when they don't have pennies. And the company is so big, 20 million customers a year, 17% of them pay with cash. It ends up costing Quick Trip a couple of $1 million to round down.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that.
So asking companies to round down is probably unreasonable.
Hmm.
When they round up, they're going to piss off their customers.
Yeah, what they're going to do is raise their prices to compensate.
That's right. And
the
then
rounding
round
down.
That's right.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that is what's going to happen.
We're happy to announce that Civil members can join me and James for a new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live. Words and Numbers Live is a members-only series in which James and I talk about issues in politics, philosophy, and economics. We take a deeper dive and then invite listeners for a live Q&A session. You can also submit your questions to us at wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com. In this week's session, which starts Thursday, November 20th at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, we examine public choice economics. To participate in this exclusive series, subscribe to Civil at civil.com. That's CIVL.com. When you log into civil.com, you'll find an archive of our past lecture series, as well as the collection of all of our episodes of Words and Numbers, and announcements about upcoming lectures in our new Words and Numbers Live series. Subscribe to Civil for $5 a month or $50 for an annual subscription. All right, I have a constitutional question now.
Oh, boy.
Does the Constitution allocate to Congress the authority to mint coin or to the federal government as a whole?
Here's the complicated answer. Congress has the ultimate authority to authorize the minting of coins. The Secretary of Treasury has the responsibility to mint them and meet the nation's needs. You could tell I'm reading here. The U.S. Mint is the body that carries out these duties, but its operations are overseen by the Treasury Department and legislative directives from Congress.
And is Treasury, I guess, considered part of the executive branch?
Yeah, that's part of the executive branch.
Okay, so we've got a situation where Congress has the power to authorize the coins as needed, I think you said. And the president could turn around and say, well, but they're not needed. So we're not going to... Yeah.
And look, if this were a big thing, if he said, we're going to get rid of the quarter because I hate all of you, there'd be immediate pushback. How will we buy our sodas from the machines? How will we buy gumballs from the machines? We need these quarters. But I don't know anybody who will rally around the penny.
No.
As a fight, it's a non-starter. There's no point. The smart move is to discontinue the penny. It's just going to raise up a bunch of problems that, there are unintended consequences to everything.
And interestingly, you don't lose, because of course it's Lincoln's image on the coin, but he's on the $5 bill. So it's not like we're losing Lincoln. But you kind of lose Jefferson if you get rid of the nickel. Jefferson appears on the $2 bill, but that's used so infrequently that there are tons of stories of people thinking it's counterfeit.
But for my money, it's the most beautiful bill that the United States produces.
The two?
It's stunning. It's absolutely gorgeous. Unbelievable. Monticello on the back, I believe it is. Is that right?
I don't know. Monticello's on the back of the nickel.
Jefferson's on the front. It's gorgeous. And it's a shame, too, that the $2 bill never caught on. Right. I don't know why it never caught on, frankly.
Well, I have a hypothesis. I was into coin collecting about the same time that the $2 bill came out, and coin collecting seemed to be a thing back then. Lots of people were doing it. And so the $2 bill comes out, this is new, so people just started collecting them. Nobody would spend them. Same thing with the dollar coin.
Yeah, and there were lots of different dollar coins, right? None of which ever really caught on. Nobody walks around with silver dollars in their pockets, or Sacagawea dollars, or Susan whatever it was dollars. I don't even remember who it was. And my memory
Susan B. Anthony,
Yeah, Susan B. Anthony, that's right. My memory fails me. The $2 bill, the reverse is the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It's a gorgeous bill. I wish we used it more. I wish people had them in their pockets, but never going to happen. And now they're not going to have pennies either.
Right.
And the question for me is, how long until pennies just simply disappear. It's not like it's going to happen overnight, right? It's going to take a while.
Mm-hmm.
How long will it take?
Yeah,
I'll
I would
find out
imagine
together.
pretty quickly. I will say, I imagine pretty quickly because very few people actually use the pennies. In fact, we're getting to the point that few people are using currency at all.
Yeah, I don't. And
I have not carried cash. I have not carried cash in 20 years.
I keep some cash on my person as a hedge against disaster. Right? It is my firm belief that anywhere in the world, I believe this to be literally true, that you could be anywhere in the world, and if you get into any kind of actual trouble, $300 is usually enough to get you out of it. So I always have $300 on my person. Notice I'm not saying in my wallet. I never have any money in my wallet. But I always got $300 on me somewhere, just in case. A hedge against disaster. But this brings us, because that might be foolish, this brings us to the actual foolishness of the week. And it rests on a previous foolishness of the week. And I can't remember for the life of me when we covered this, but I'm sure you will remember. There was a newspaper, a weekly newspaper called the Marion County Record, that you're probably not ringing a bell yet. But they did something that the local police didn't really appreciate, and the local police got in league with the local sheriffs and the local judge, and they came up with a search warrant, and they raided the place. Do you remember when that small town newspaper got raided by all of the bigwigs in town?
No, I don't know what
And
you're
then
talking
the
about.
very next day, the 90-something-year-old owner of it died of a heart attack.
No bells at all.
Which his widow said clearly the result of this ridiculous raid. Who raids a weekly newspaper? A weekly local newspaper? Circulation, not a damn thing. Right? We used to have one in the town I grew up in called the Town Times. And, 14 people
You don't
read
even
this.
sell them. You give them away.
Yeah, they couldn't sell them. And actually, they couldn't give them away either. The Town Times went out of business. Anyway, this all originated, it was a dispute between a local restaurant owner and the newspaper. Well, okay. And then the newspaper got a copy of her driving record, something to do with a city liquor license. And before you know it, they were digging into the background of the police chief. And then the raid happened. Funny. Now, after all is said and done, the county has to pay $3 million and apologize for a thoroughgoing violation of the First Amendment.
Yeah.
You can't just go mess around with a newspaper because you don't like what they print. Shame on you. If you're a law enforcement officer and you don't know that, if that's not coded into your DNA, you should be fired immediately. Police officers should know the constitutional rights of the people they're sworn to protect. And the judge who signed the search warrant, he should go to jail. But $3 million in an apology is a really nice start.
Yeah, the downside being that it's the taxpayers of the town that have to pay that.
Well, only in part, because it turns out it's mostly the insurance company that has to pay that.
Ah, right. All right. So the taxpayers get to pay for higher insurance premiums on things that the town owns. Yeah.
And I believe the taxpayers are on the hook directly for $50,000 of it. Which, in a tiny little place, going to add up pretty quick. Everybody meets a logical end sooner or later. Take heart. These people got exactly what they had coming. And they might have had worse coming than this. But I'll take this one as a win. Hooray for the First Amendment.
Well, that's got to be the first foolishness that we've had chance to follow up on.
Yeah, I mean,
how much time had to have elapsed between the occurrence of the raid and now the court case going all the way through and now judgment?
Well, it was August of 2023 when the raid happened.
All right.
Year and a half. A little less than
Yeah.
a year and a half.
2023? No, 2 years.
2 years. Well,
Yeah.
no, year and a half.
August 2023. It's now November 2025.
Oh, that's right. We are past August,
Yeah.
aren't we? It is more than 2
Yeah.
years. My math,
The funny
my
thing is,
yearly base 12 math confuses me.
James, the funny thing is I had to do that today. I'm thinking 2020, which one is it? 4? No. 5? 6? No.
Yeah, no, that
That'll be 5.
happens. That happens to me for at least 6 months after the year changes. Because
There's so many
now
of
and again,
these.
once in a blue moon, I have to write a check.
Yes.
And I wrote a check once a couple of years ago that was wrong by 6 years. and somebody handed it back to me and said, you might want to look at this. I'm like, oh yeah, right. It's not 2012 at all, is it? Anyway, you had something you wanted to talk about today, if memory serves.
I want to talk about, what we want to talk about broadly are bubbles, financial bubbles. And there's a backstory to this that not too many people are talking about. I think it'll become a thing in the next few years or so.
We've been tracking this for about a year now.
Yeah, we've got this weirdness going on that we saw once before back in 2020. And the weirdness is you've got an economy that's kind of, well, today it's a tepid economy. In 2020, it was a hellaciously bad economy. But in both cases, the stock market's going gangbusters. It's going great. In 2020, the height of COVID, so here we are in this situation where unemployment was at a level we hadn't seen since the Great Depression. We've shut down by edict at least a quarter of the economy. Nobody knows when it's going to end, if at all. The government's writing checks to whoever wants them. Just put your hand out. And in the midst of all of this upheaval, and I can't underline this enough, that period of COVID economically was more upheaval than we have seen since the Great Depression. That in the midst of that upheaval, the stock market was making returns that were more akin to the dot-com era.
That's right.
Why? Amidst all that would the stock market be booming? And so too today.
There was no real good reason for it if you're looking at the market as a rational thing, right? That you've got these clear, easy inputs and clear, easy outputs. Well, if you shut down a quarter of the economy, most of the businesses that are traded publicly are going to lose 10, 20% off their bottom line, right? Because and then once you realize that the shutdowns are international, right? All of their markets are being shut down. That should have been reflected in the stock price in a very negative way. And yet the exact opposite thing happened.
Yeah, the stock market was up 25% over that same period that we'd locked down the economy.
Yeah, and that was, and let's be real clear, you're talking about a period during which Joe Biden was president.
Right. Trump
doesn't become president until Trump is president until 2020. So this is the
20. Oh, I guess it is Trump. It's his last year.
This is the last Trump year, and then he's the one thing. He's the constant, because he's in office now, and we see the same sort of thing happening.
He is, but I'm very confident in saying that's purely coincidence.
I am too.
It has nothing to do with the president.
Well, I don't know that it has nothing to do with it, but
I'm about to lay blame, and it's not at the feet of the president.
Well, look, I've said often, and you have too, that presidents get way too much credit when economies are good and way too much blame when economies are bad.
Yeah.
Right, and I'll stand by that for the rest of all time. But go ahead, lay some blame.
So let me talk about what's going on now. The economy is the best. The phrase I've been using for the past 18 plus months is tepid. It's a tepid economy. The economy is growing, but it's growing at a significantly slower pace than it did prior to COVID on average. Unemployment is low, but it's been rising consistently since 2022. Inflation is back under control, if you put it in air quotes, but it's still at a level that's about a percentage point higher than the average prior to COVID. The economy is not in recession, but it's no great shakes either, right? It's a tepid economy. But what's been happening? I've got here from last year this time to now, S&P 500 is up 15%. The NASDAQ is up 21%. Gold is up 61%. Silver's up 73%. Bitcoin's up 15%. The financial market is going great, but way out of line of what you would expect given the economy.
Right. It doesn't mirror the reality of the economy, right? But markets are expectations too. And they're actually mostly expectations. But so we can conclude that people are relatively confident that things are going to remain okay and that businesses are going to make a lot of money. But there seems to be something else going on here, because it's every investment vehicle you can point to. If you just threw darts at them, you would end up winning.
Well, and it's not just the financial stuff. Houses, people complain about the rising cost of housing. Well, houses fall into this category as well.
Yeah. You know who doesn't complain about that? People who own houses.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
People, and especially people like me who have mortgages on houses.
Yeah. If you got a mortgage at 1-2% or whatever it is you managed to get before the COVID years, you're sitting pretty.
I love that I own a house right now.
Yeah.
Because the value is going up and the payment is staying the same.
Yeah. You can actually be in a situation right now where your mortgage interest rate is less than inflation.
Oh, it is. I'm paying 2.8.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
consumer inflation is like what, 3.3, 3.2 something.
I'm 0.2 or so ahead of the game. But look, the obvious question is, how can every investment vehicle be going up to this degree? Right? There's something going on that's pushing everything forward that is not on the usual list of suspects.
Yeah, and this is where I'm gonna put the blame. I'm gonna put the blame at the Fed. And here's what I think is happening. And I'm going to tread lightly here because we're dealing in new territory. From 2008 to 2020, the Fed altered our banking regime. I'll use that term. And roughly speaking, what happened is, prior to 2008, the Fed kept a tight leash on liquidity, how much money was floating around in the system. After 2020, the Fed lets loose as much liquidity as markets want, they can have. And this coincided with...
Stop there for a second. There was a perfectly good there was a reason for that.
Oh, a really good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the financial crisis in 2008. Our financial crisis came within moments of basically locking up. Right. There wasn't, I owe you money, you owe that guy money, the other guy owes that guy, and there is no money, and so we can't transact anything, and everything stops. Yeah.
And then in 2020, with the lockdowns, there's all kinds of cash infusions there.
Yeah, so what happened was in 2008, the Fed realized it did not have the ability to inject liquidity into markets fast enough. If another 2008 came along, it could end up in vapor lock. And so it changed how it goes about doing things, and there's all kinds of footnotes there I'm not going to talk about. But the net result is the Fed now has the system it uses for handling interest rates / money supply is a system that enables it to inject liquidity into markets very quickly. But it comes at a cost, and the cost is, prior to 2008, in the old system, the Fed could directly influence interest rates across the board, from short-term rates to long-term rates. Under this new system, where it can inject very quickly, the cost it comes at is that the Fed can only directly influence the short-term rates. And so when you see, and that's why, for example, we saw the Fed injecting liquidity into markets, and short-term interest rates are moving, but long-term interest rates are the same. And people would say to me, look, the Fed cut interest rates. How come my mortgage rate hasn't gone down? It's not going down because there's no connection anymore between the short and the long term. The Fed's only impacting the short-term rates.
And that's hard for people to get a handle on. That is confusing, right? You would think that one would logically influence the other.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't. And it doesn't.
James and I are delighted to be working with Civil. For years, we have been pushing people to think about how we can make the world a better place. Civil's mission of upgrading society fits exactly with what James and I have been talking about for years. Civil helps us by allowing us to do what we do best, which is researching topics that are important and communicating these to our listeners in ways that we hope they find interesting. To see Civil's extensive list of content, including our podcast, Words and Numbers, and our new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live, visit civil.com. That's CIVL.com. The smoking gun here in my mind is how banks react to this new system the Fed has imposed. Under the old system, when the Fed wanted to inject liquidity, it put more liquidity in the markets, and what did banks do? They turned around and loaned it out. And so now it's easier for you to get a loan. It's easier for you to get a loan. It's easier for you to go and buy stuff. And so the economy starts to pick up that way. So injecting liquidity meant increasing that banks would start lending more and more and more. Today, banks can already lend as much as they want. So when the Fed increases liquidity, cuts interest rates, you don't get more lending. Instead, you get the banks shifting their portfolios around. And I claim it's the shifting portfolios around, pursuing higher rates of return. What's happening in effect is the Fed is injecting liquidity into markets, and whereas before it would go into goods markets, giving us inflation, now it goes into financial markets, giving us what we don't call inflation, but basically is that. It's a rising stock price. You see rising financial asset prices.
We call them returns.
Yeah, and I claim that look, what you're really seeing is inflation by another name.
Sure, and let's be brutally honest. There were always ways for well-heeled and well-informed people to take advantage of inflation.
Sure, yeah.
Right, and if, for example, if things were going into commodities, well, the commodities market, if dollars were going into commodities, then the commodities markets were where you wanted to be. Mm-hmm. You'd want to buy commodities futures and things of this nature.
You could only do that if you've got a bunch of money sitting on the side that you can mess with. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you can't do that.
You're out of luck.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, if you live in paycheck to paycheck now, you are also out of luck, because now it's, instead of commodities, it's stocks.
Yeah.
It's precious metals. It's real estate. It's every investment vehicle. And the reason for this, put most simply, is there are a lot of dollars floating around that the Fed printed, and they have to go somewhere.
Yeah, and before people with a bit of knowledge of the system come back and start nitpicking about the Fed printing money, James is using that as shorthand. What the Fed is doing is expanding liquidity.
That's right. The money supply is increasing.
Yeah. Now, I first started playing with this. I ran the ideas past you back in 2020 when we saw that weirdness of the economy is in horrible condition, and yet stock prices are going up. And we talked about it. I can remember talking with you about this back and forth, and coming to the realization that I think what's happening is the Fed is expanding liquidity, money supply is increasing, rather than seeing that as inflation, it's going into financial markets. And that's what's driving the stock prices up. And I said to you at the time, if I'm right, when the economy turns around, people are going to withdraw that money from financial markets, start spending it in goods markets, and then you're going to see two things happen almost simultaneously. stock prices will drop and goods prices will rise. And lo and behold, come 2022, that's exactly what happened, and we got 9% inflation.
Yep. But we're right back to where we started.
I claim we're back at that. So the Fed cut rates for the first time back in, was it September of 2024, after we went through that long period of of the Fed holding interest rates high. It cut interest rates. And I was saying at the time, the Fed's not going to cut interest rates. I gave all kinds of reasons. I showed the money supply. I showed what was happening. I said, look, the economy is on track for the money supply to be back to where it was prior to all the COVID nonsense. If the Fed just toes the line for another 9 to 12 months. I said, the Fed's going to toe the line. It's not going to cut. And it didn't. It cut interest rates by like 50 basis points. Huge cut in interest rates. And sure enough, what happened is inflation that was coming down starts to slow. It's still coming down, but not as fast. And then the Fed cuts interest rates again, just a couple of times, most recently last week, a week before. And what do you see? Inflation settling at about 1 percentage point higher than what it was prior to COVID.
Yeah. We've all decided that that's the new normal, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's a new normal. Now, I'll give the Fed a break here, because the Fed, while I'm saying, look, this is what's going on, the Fed's injecting liquidity, we're getting high stock prices that are going to come back eventually dressed up as inflation. The Fed's doing this in large part because the government, because of its budget deficits, is crowding out. It's borrowing so much money that if the Fed doesn't step in and provide more liquidity, before you know it, the government's, the size of financial markets are gargantuan, even relative to the government, if you can imagine that.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, the government is the biggest dog on the block. And when he starts eating more, he drives up interest rates. That slows the economy.
Yep. And the interesting thing of all the stuff you just said, the interesting and distressing thing is that there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? We're going to pay for this, but we're going to pay for it in the form of inflation.
Yeah, ultimately, that's how we're going to pay for it.
And inflation is insidious because it's tax that no one has to implement.
And nobody votes for.
You're never accountable for it.
There's no congressional guard against this thing.
No. And it's going to happen, and it's going to cost everybody, because that's what inflation does.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see the wild ride that assets of various classes have taken over the past year or two, and, if you've held on to these things, you've done well. Mm-hmm. Nothing lasts forever.
Yeah, and now, having said all of that, I'm still bullish on stocks. I think they're overpriced right now, generally speaking, but I'll tell you right out, all of my retirement is in stock markets, and I fully expect a correction. But long term, I think that's the place to be. It's the smart money.
Well, if you expect a correction, shouldn't you be? If there's going to be a correction, shouldn't you move to cash until there is?
Well, see, that's an interesting thing. I have not run the calculations, but I've read people who have run the calculations, and they say that you lose more money not being in the market when you should be than you do being out of it when you shouldn't be in it. So
okay.
I kind of take that to heart and say, look, I live with the good and the bad, but on average, the stock market goes up. So the first thing I'll say is, look, fundamentally, the economy is solid, right? The federal government is got all kinds of financial problems, but the federal government is not the economy. We're the economy. We're doing, generally speaking, all right. And so long as we're doing all right, the stock market will tend to grow over time at a reasonable pace. But I think there's another factor at play now that's never been at play before, and that's the demise of Social Security, or at least Social Security as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
When it becomes apparent, and as the government starts to actually say to people, we're going to cut your Social Security, or we're going to raise your taxes, or whatever it is, younger people are going to realize they can't rely on Social Security. And they're going to start asking serious questions about how they can prepare for their retirement. And the answer is going to be invest in stocks. And that's going to put upward pressure on stock prices.
Yeah, that's right.
All of a sudden, you're going to have a whole new generation of
Hmm.
investors.
Three new generations, probably.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a good thing, right? But one of the side effects is it means if you're in the market now, you get to ride that wave.
Yeah, and if you're not and you miss it, you missed it.
Yeah.
I don't know. We don't give stock advice. We're not that kind of podcast.
No. And don't take it as stock advice. When I talk about the stock market being a good place to be, I'm talking about the long run.
Yeah.
10 years, 20 years,
look,
30 years.
Take it all with a grain of salt, because that's exactly what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
But, as we look around, everywhere we look right now, there are bubbles everywhere. Every asset class is in a bubble right now. And you start to think, well, it is in the nature of bubbles to pop. That's why we refer to this as bubbles, because sooner or later they pop.
Yeah.
And I have no earthly idea which one goes first or what time it starts happening. But when it happens, it probably is going to happen all at once. And that's going to be a miserable time for a lot of people.
Well, yes and no. I would imagine it's going to look like the pop back at the end of the dot-com era. And I was actually in the market
that's exactly
then.
right. Yep, that's exactly right.
And it was, if you were in an aggressive stock portfolio, you would have lost, as I did at the time, about 50%. And when I say lost 50%, what I mean is, it went down. I wasn't out the cash. The value went down by 50%. But over the course of the next 10 years, it came back.
Yeah.
So again, long run, you're doing well. If you're looking to make a buck in 24 hours, don't talk to us.
Or if you were looking to retire that year.
Yeah, or if you're looking to retire in the next 1 or 2 years, that's a different story.
I mean, if you were retiring that year and you lost 50% of your portfolio, you might not be retiring that year.
Right.
Yeah.
So which happened back in .com. Yeah, a lot of people, older people, went back to work.
There are very stiff realities underlying these things.
Yeah.
And I try never to make light of it, because every time the market goes down significantly, human lives are ruined.
They are, but I think Americans have learned something, and I think they learned it. I was there. It was back in 1987, the stock market crash of 87, which was around, in magnitude, it was around the same size as the stock market crash of 1929.
Yeah.
And whereas in 1929, Americans were new to investing, and there weren't that many people invested in the stock market to begin with, people panicked. And all they want to do is get away from markets, get away from banks. But in 1987, they did the reverse. They saw a buying opportunity. They said, absolutely, I want in. These are rock bottom prices. And that turned the whole thing. 6 months later, you never would have known there had been a stock market crash.
That's right. I got a better one for you. I was sitting on cash for my children in their accounts. And on September 11th, 2001, the markets had a significant downturn.
Mm-hmm.
Significant.
Yep. Yeah.
And I hemmed and hawed and waited a couple of days and just plowed every dime I could find in.
Yep.
And then walked away from it and stopped thinking about it.
Yep. So that's the key. Stop thinking about it. Yeah.
There was the buying opportunity. Now I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
It happens every now and again. It typically happens because something horrible has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Typically. And, I never want to make light of that. You don't want to feel good about yourself getting rich because people died. But that happens. And in 87, generally people didn't panic, but there were a few suicides.
Yeah.
Right? People literally died because of it. And, I don't want to dishonor their memories in any way, because that is just a horrible thing, a horrible way to go. But in the long term, you're absolutely right. And I think almost everybody I knew at the time was fully aware that this was going to pass. It's not a long-term problem.
Right.
People didn't even know what the technical issue even was.
Right.
And it didn't seem to break anybody's heart. 6 months later, it was like it never happened.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. If you go to the data, look at the economic data, unemployment, GDP growth, whatever it is you want to look at, of course, the stock market. If you look on a monthly or a quarterly basis, you'll see the crash of 87.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're looking at annual data, you won't see it because it crashed and corrected within a period less than 12 months.
Yeah. I'm just wondering where we're going to see the fissures first.
That's a good question.
I
don't
think my
know.
gut tells me it's going to be real estate.
I was going to say real estate. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's where people get the most nervous and make mistakes, both buying and selling. And I think in the aggregate, we see it there first.
I agree with you for that. And I'll throw in one other, that real estate is subject to two prices, not just one. One is the price of the house, of course. The other is the mortgage rate. And if mortgage rates start to climb, that's going to make people skittish, just like housing prices climbing.
There's an inverse relationship, right? The higher the mortgage rate goes, the lower the price has to get.
Yeah, one would hope. Yeah.
That's just how it is. People have X dollars a month that they can afford to spend on housing.
Mm-hmm.
Can't get around that.
Yeah.
So I think housing. I also think probably Bitcoin is due for some kind of catastrophe.
Maybe it's just wishful thinking on my part. Bitcoin has consistently surprised me over many years.
Me too. I wish to God I had heard of it when it first came out. I didn't. And by the time I heard of it, I thought, well, way too expensive for me now.
I heard about that. And I have to thank our dear friend, Steve Horowitz. I was visiting him. He had invited me to give a talk. He was somewhere in upstate New York.
Yeah, Sarah Lawrence.
Nonetheless, I was at his university giving a talk, and I'm sitting in his office, and we started talking about Bitcoin because Bitcoin had been there were rumblings of it, and I said, "Have you messed with it?" No, I haven't messed with it, but I really should. Blah blah blah. And anyway, as a result of that conversation, I said, "Heck with it. I'm going to put $100 in," and so I bought $100 worth of Bitcoin. Bitcoin was at $200 at the time.
All I know,
I got half a Bitcoin.
I don't feel right even sharing this with our listeners, but had I been on the right side of Bitcoin enough to buy 3 of them at any point, my entire life would be different right now.
Yeah.
My entire life would be different right now if I had bought 3 of these damn things that used to cost pennies.
Well,
I try not to get lost in that thought.
Once upon a time, I owned 11 Bitcoin.
Oh.
Yes. And what did I do? I got scared. I thought, oh no, it's going to crash. And it did crash, but then it came back.
Yeah.
But of course, it came back after I had sold my 11 Bitcoin.
For me, I'm afraid that ship has sailed. I hope that whatever the next goddamn thing is, I can figure it out before it's too late. But given the nature of things, it's probably not going to go that way. But, if you're out there and you have 3 Bitcoins and you want to change your life completely, you look me up. Until then, which is probably, I'm just guessing, never, we'll try to keep a happy thought. We'll try not to get too despondent over what has occurred. And, I think ultimately you're right about most or all of this. And, as is your custom, you're usually right about most things. We don't run our mouths too much about things we're wrong about. It happens, but it doesn't happen often. I am both uplifted and deflated at the same moment by everything you've just said today. So I guess you've done your job relatively well. And now, as usual, we wait. Until then, be nice to each other, and Ant, I'll catch you next time.
See you next time, James. At Words and Numbers, we spend a lot of time talking about what's going on in the economy and the government. But fundamentally, all of this boils down to one thing. The greatest threat facing modern society is a lack of respect, that people who disagree somehow find it difficult, if not impossible, to discuss their differences in a civil manner. We at Civil are interested in upgrading civilization by encouraging people to engage with new ideas and ultimately engage civilly with each other. If you share this idea, please join us by subscribing at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.